And there we are. We're live. We are back here for MidDay Café. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Mike Giannotti, and I'm a technology specialist for Microsoft. We've got a whole range of new people because we're kicking off a new fiscal year for Microsoft, and we're opening it up. Oh, and isn't that nice that Sue came and decided to join us? But it's a new year, and so we're getting started. We've got two topics for you today. I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to be talking real quickly about the broadcast development kit for Microsoft Teams. And Scott, what are you talking about?
Today, I'm going to talk about Microsoft 365 and Multi-Geo.
And Multi-Geo. And then we have our esteemed panel joining and sitting in to see what's going on with all this. So why don't we do some quick introductions? Scott, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Scott Moore. I'm a Teams technical specialist, also in the HLS space as well.
Samir?
Yes, I'm same as Scott. I'm a principal technology specialist, Microsoft Teams, HLS.
Tracy?
Hi there, Tracy DeWald, Teams technical specialist in HLS as well.
Our little latecomer, Sue?
Hello there. Tracy, I think it's worth mentioning that you also came from Avaya, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
It's kind of like a badge. I came from Cisco, and I'll probably be carrying that with me for years too. So I am a Microsoft Teams technical specialist.
And Jim?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Warner, and same as all these guys, I'm a Teams technical specialist.
Teams?
I think I forgot to say my name.
Yeah, who are you?
My name is Sue Vencill. Okay, we're good. We're gonna edit this, right? Just kidding.
It's all good. There's no edits. This is just one go through. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to actually share my screen. So let me come over here to screen sharing, and I'm going to share a post that I will actually be putting up with the podcast. A link to this, along with some others. So just this last week, I was super excited. I don't know about the rest of you, but I get asked all the time for large events and things that people want to do at a corporate level, not just a meeting like we're in. A lot of times there is questions, how can we make this more polished? And they've seen examples like we have Satya Nadella every month. He does his CEO Connect, and it's like a TV show, right? You got live audience, you've got multi-cameras and all that. And orgs are like, well, how do we do this? And especially if we don't have a lot of physical infrastructure on site, how can we provide that? And so this is why I got pumped up. I don't know, before we go into it, anybody else here kind of those things around polished presentations? And the crickets are chirping.
Well, I'm gonna guess here though, out of all of us, you probably have the most experience with production, so I could see why you were excited about it.
Well, I get into a lot of people know I'm into streaming media, but so this is a whole new realm though for it. We had previously introduced the ability to pull NDI with Microsoft Teams, but now the development kit takes it to a whole new level. The way the development kit works is it takes all of the recording function and stuff. Like right now, as we're doing this, while it's going to go up to the cloud, stuff's taking still place on a desktop, right? A lot of the processes and things around that. So then you get into, well, is my system beefy enough? Isn't it? Blah, blah, all that stuff. This offloads it all. And it does it both output and ingestion. So I'm going to kind of walk through to explain, but in a nutshell, what happens is when you set up the broadcast kit, you're actually getting an Azure VM that's going to be up in the cloud. And it's acting, I've got back here a new Tech TriCaster. It's a big physical box with lots of inputs, etc., that sits here in my office, which is great. But this takes all of that kind of ability, puts it in the cloud in an Azure VM. And so now when I come in, I'm able to do, number one, we can do audio in or out. So we can take multiple sources. They have a whole UI for this that you can go in and configure, and you can input multiple sources. Through that UI, you can be doing the mixing and switching between them. And we can take both RTMP and SRT, which are industry standards. We can also, though, output as well. So you can take sources from multiple places, even globally, into that Azure instance where it's going to handle all the processing and mixing and ensure that you're not having like here's my head here, and then I'm talking and there it goes, hey, and then I'm over here, which sometimes happens locally, right? We've all seen that. It makes sure everything is just silky smooth, right? It handles that there. And then you can also output and even send it to Microsoft Teams. So very cool capability. There's a whole diagram around this for setting this up. You'll note down below, it's actually available today. You can start working with this stuff today. So they have a documentation kit. There is a sample web portal where you do all the mixing, and then the meetings extension. Now, note, they all say sample. So the one thing, while this is great, this is for building your solution. This is not a Microsoft fully fledged solution. So I want to be clear about that. It's actually open source, and you can find it when you click those links. It is going to bring you to GitHub, right? For where we're doing open source repositories and code and contact. So you can see here's the contributors, and they've got all their information, but they do have the notice. They're calling it pre-release. That doesn't mean it's not available to start using. They're just saying this is not a product today. It is open source code that you can implement to build your solution, right? And that's why they have, when you go through the documentation, they have all the step-by-steps, how you can customize and the things that you might want to pull and different resources, et cetera, to create that really seamless experience. But it does infer that there is a level of sophistication at the customer end. Having said that, there's also, because it is open source, while you are supporting it yourself, you're also not being charged for that. You do get charged for Azure time, but not for the solution samples and all that code itself. So it is available. It says it is written 100% in C#. So that you're going to want to think about that if you have folks that are going to want to get in and work with it. But they go through all of the different pieces here, and it's real. Some of the cool things that it does. Number one, like you see us all in this Brady Bunch piece, it actually, part of the extraction, if we were in a Teams meeting, part of what you're able to do is to take an individual box in here and extract it as a single video feed. That's just one example, right? And it does that on the back end, again, not through the client, the back end services, so that it's going to be a much better and more seamless experience. So very cool stuff. I'm going to put the link, when we post this video, you should absolutely take a look at this. You might want to talk to Microsoft Services if you're worried that you might not have the full expertise in-house, or one of our partners for partner services with somebody who really has Azure domain expertise and Teams would be good. But great solution, getting a lot of the stuff that people have been wanting to start to do for mixing, moving it into the cloud. And it's really a first step in that direction. So any questions from anybody here in our call?
I have a question. Where does this fit?
Anybody
Because I
else?
know that I have a, we have the broadcast development kit and now NDI. I guess my question is, because there's also OBS. Mike, can you talk about how this kind of fits into all those things? How does OBS comparably?
Yeah, so no, that's a great question. So OBS is a software solution for mixing video sources and then providing an output from that. And that can either be to a recording, it can be to public services via RTMP, publishing. It can even show up locally as a virtual webcam, all the mixing. And they'll let you do screen in screen and green screen, blue screen, effects for transitions, etc. It's an open source. It's freely available. It kind of does, again, what a TriCaster does, but in software. So the benefits are anybody can get started. Gamers have been using OBS for years to mix their stuff coming
Streaming.
from an Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, or PC, and then their webcam. My son has a podcast. I laugh every time I say this, but again, I'm dating myself. So in my day, it was different. He has a D&D, Dungeons and Dragons podcast that people watch, and they watch them play Dungeons and Dragons. I had no idea this was a thing, but evidently it's a big thing. And he uses OBS to mix it. So that's available, but it also infers that you have a PC, again, with sufficient horsepower and stuff, because it's putting a lot of onus on this. A TriCaster does it in hardware. And that's what, if you watch your local TV station, typically what you're actually seeing is the productions being done through a NewTek TriCaster, because it allows them to do cameras. It allows that person on the street, the reporter talking. If you've ever seen it where it's kind of pixelating a bit, it's because all it is no longer is it the big cameras with the van and the microwave or whatever it is that's shooting that out. They're taking an iPhone. I kid you not. They take an iPhone and then they're pulling that feed in remote over data. I mean, really low cost is available and very simple. So, but what happens with an OBS is that could push out to this source. It could do some mixing and push out to it. It could also consume it, right? Because it can receive that. So it just gives more flexibility. OBS has been, up until now for us, a locally client-only solution, co-located with the Teams piece. Now it can actually be somewhere else, pushing its feed up as just one of several feeds. Any other questions? All right. So that's it for me. Like I said, I'll put the link to the kit, to the post about it. Take a look at it. Some great resources. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to I'm going to stop sharing, but Mr. Scott Moore is going to talk about Multi-Geo.
So I'm going to talk about Multi-Geo. Let's talk about what this is. Here's another blog article. This actually came out on the 13th. But what is Microsoft 365 Multi-Geo? It actually helps organizations help meet their data residency requirements. And let's talk about what does that actually do. So it allows admins, they can provision and store data at rest in geographic locations, of their choice. So as we extend with the capabilities of Microsoft 365 and talking about multiple regions, a lot of organizations do need to adhere to keeping data resident to those specific locations. We talk about what type of data. We've had Multi-Geo out there for a little bit, with support for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and now that extends to Teams. So let's talk about how this works. As I mentioned, by default, Office 365's tenant, the central location where the M365 subscription was provisioned is where that user's data was stored previously. Now with Multi-Geo, what we have is the admin can actually specify what's called a PDL, which is a preferred data location, which is essentially setting up satellite locations within the organization. And then that PDL, that's actually an end user attribute in Azure Directory. So you can set that at the user basis. And once you set that, then the data would be residing at rest when that's actually set. Let's talk about what that actually means for Teams data. There's 3 types of Teams data that this is applicable to. First, we have end user chat data. So that's either one-to-one or one-to-end chat data. And the way that works is the creator of the chat is the data owner. And then the PDL the preferred data location of that end user is actually determine where that chat data will sit. So if someone initiates the chat and they're in a different region, then they're going to be the data owner. And that data would actually stay with where that person who originated the chat. Then you also have meeting chat data, and essentially the same thing works there. Is the organizer of the meeting will be the data owner for the PDL. So whomever scheduled the meeting, that's where the data will be stored there.
Hey, Scott.
Sure.
Go ahead,
Hey,
Mike
Sue.
G. Mike G's got a question.
Okay.
You're muted, Mike. So I had a quick question because you were mentioning the attribute, right? That's in AD. So I know that if we've had orgs, like I've had ones in the past where we worked with them, especially when I was an architect and we set up some of the their multi-geo capability, and that attribute would go in. If that attribute already stipulates that, right? If they institute it now for teams, would it just pick that? I'm just curious if you know, or maybe that's something we should follow up. But if it'll just pick it up and now start determining that for teams as well, or do they have? Is this an additional attribute?
I believe that's a pre-existing attribute that was there for the other technologies.
Like
other
for
services.
Exchange or
Right.
in SharePoint? Yep.
Right. What I will mention is in the article that we have at the bottom, there are some additional references. One of the additional documentation links, it does actually show you which regions and which locations that are there and supported today. Specifically for Asia, Germany, as we know, with Europe and GDPR, and Germany with I forget the name of it, but there's the Germany has some very specific things as well. Yeah. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's I was just curious. I didn't know if it was an additional or if some of our companies that we're working with, if they have that, if that could just pick up. All right, I'll shut up.
Yeah, so it says at the first paragraph, last sentence, it says Microsoft 365 Multi-Geo includes support for Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, and now Teams. So does that means Teams with all the features, or we are starting with only chat and channels for now? Or like, for example, voicemails, call histories, contact cards, and stuff like that.
Voicemail would actually be that'd be part of Exchange. So we know that's actually going to reside in the Exchange mailbox. So if you have that set up for Exchange, then that's going to dovetail into that. But for now, what we know is for Teams, it's the three pieces: the end user chat, the meeting data, and the next piece, which I was going to describe next, is also team and channel data. Now, the key thing around team and channel data is it also will utilize the PDL, but the data owner is actually going to be the Office 365 group. So the group, you would actually assign the PDL for team and channel data rather than for actual end users. So it's a good question as to whether other things, but I'm assuming we have to do some checking. But the way I understand it is the other things that you mentioned there, Samir, that's going to be based on where those existing data retention locations are there, such as SharePoint Online, OneNote, and Exchange.
So other question that came to my mind was, let's say we have a multi-meeting, like a series of meetings, right? Recurring meetings. The data was already in the US, like before this multi-geo GA. What happens in the future?
So it's based on the scheduler. So if the scheduler, the meeting was based in the US, then that data is going to stay resident to the US. If for some reason, or you have a distributed team and the scheduler of the meeting was based in Germany, then and they were assigned to Germany as a location, then that meeting data for that particular meeting that they scheduled, as the owner, the data owner, it will actually stay in Germany. That's the way I understand it.
So what you're saying is that the data will follow the organizer, not attendees.
That is correct. It's based upon the actual scheduler of the meeting for meetings. So one thing I was going to talk about this later, but I can go ahead and talk about this now. One quick note, though, is this is all about data residency. So this is not around, Multi-Geo is not around network performance. So that's a completely different topic. So it's really around, supporting data residency. It's not really around performance optimization. So there is some documentation out there that's also linked that can talk about performance optimization. That's actually data in transit, but it's also network optimization. So there are some licensing requirements for this. So it is available as an add-on for all Microsoft 365 subscriptions plans for EA customers. It is available for M365 for F1, F3, and I'll scroll down because that's actually in the article as well. So I'll just go through this, but there are some pieces around here around licensing. So I mentioned F1, F3, E3, and E5 for M365. Office 365, it's actually for F3, E1, E3, or E5. And for Exchange Online for Plan 1 or Plan 2. For OneDrive for Business, Plan 1 or Plan 2. And SharePoint Online, Plan 1 or Plan 2. Any thoughts or questions so far around that?
So what you're saying is customer needs to purchase this additional license, geo licensing, to be compliant.
Correct. Yep. And it's available based on the ones that I just mentioned there.
So do they need to purchase license for all the employees or only for certain, where few people they need to be?
It would probably be wise to do it for all.
Mm-hmm.
Because you probably can't predict who's going to, for things like instant messaging chat, scheduling meetings. So it would be wise to do it for all employees. Otherwise, you're gonna, if you think about the inverse, if you didn't do it for all employees, you could actually have data that would not be assignable through the PDLs through Multi-Geo. So it would be advisable that I'll do that. Another thing to take note of, because there's a question also further down in the blog, is around security and compliance. So with Multi-Geo, all existing information protection and compliance capabilities, they will continue working as is, with M365 Multi-Geo. So the last thing is really around referenceability. So there are a couple of, as I mentioned before, a couple of additional links in the article that talk about some of the deeper foundations here. As I mentioned before, the locations, I believe the second one under planning for Multi-Geo, that's actually shows where those locations are. So that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. You guys have any additional questions, thoughts?
So basically assign the license and we're good to go. There's no configuration needed. You don't need to change any Azure AD attributes, nothing like that.
Actually, you do need to assign the Azure attributes. So you do need to, determine where those users are located, and then based upon that location, you would assign the attribute forward down to the end user level. And then for groups, the same. So if you have groups that need to stay resident in a certain location, then you would also do that at a group level as well. So there would be some work there.
All that doesn't have to be like there is a UI, and I've played around with it before, but you can do all that through PowerShell and script,
right?
Which is typically what you'll do.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah, this is something big because I know a lot of we've had Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint. And they're like, well, what about Teams?
It's coming now. It's here. So
yeah. The other question I was thinking in my mind is, do we have any licensing for Multi-Geo for email and SharePoint and OneDrive?
Do we have licensing? I mean, yeah, it's published out there.
No. Multi-Geo support for email, SharePoint, OneDrive, right? So
yeah,
we have those licensing, right?
Yeah, we've had that for a long time.
So this is nothing new. So if they have that license, will not cover for the Teams.
So my understanding is if you have that licensing, now Teams is part of the fold for that. So it's basically, if you had that pre-existing licensing, now you can extend these capabilities to Teams.
Exactly.
Very cool. I have a lot of global customers, international customers this year. I think this is going to be a very hot topic for them, especially we're in health, life, and sciences. I mean, we have a lot of regulations and requirements, and where data is stored. So great topic. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's our two topics. Anything anybody else wants to throw out there? Anything?
I would love to hear from our people out there. Give us some topic ideas.
Topic.
I would love that.
Yeah. Anything you'd like us to demystify and talk deeper.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd love to.
There is one thing I'll mention. I did see something briefly this morning that I believe that there is a new porting portal. I saw a blog article very early this morning. So if you're porting numbers to Microsoft, I believe that process will be streamlined, but there's more to come. So that was actually released late last week.
Yeah.
I've been hearing some really exciting things about the work that's been done to improve porting. I haven't seen an update. I've only heard, but I think we're overdue. I think there's going to be some good things coming our way.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle is losing carriers not want to give up, right? I don't know how that we can do process forms, automations, apps, whatever. Losing carrier, we're like, nope, I'm gonna make this, hard as much as possible. Like, yeah.
Right. Well, the way I understand it is I think from a regulatory perspective, they have 30 days to respond from a losing carrier perspective, but they will
drag
their feet, and they're losing. I mean, they're the losing carrier, so they try to do the minimum. But yeah, I've ran into that, and it is always dynamic when working with carriers.
Yeah, one thing to clarify, a lot of my customer always ask, "Oh, I don't want to port my number to Microsoft." Just want to be clarified. You're not porting your number to Microsoft, you're porting to your own tenant, and you can port it back if you don't want to leave it there.
Right.
Okay, so it's not Microsoft owning number, it's you owning number in your tenant.
That's a great point.
And that actually, we're gonna, I guess we're kind of segue. We're gonna kind of go panel mode, but that kind of segues to another conversation, because also with Operator Connect, you could also port those numbers to your Operator Connect carriers.
Mm-hmm.
So it opens up a lot of possibilities there, and then essentially, or there could be a scenario where you may already have your numbers ported or with that carrier. It's just a matter of them repointing that on their back end, and now making those numbers available in the Operator Connect portal as well. So,
yeah, I think maybe there's some opportunity for us, and then we are improving our interface for number assignment, number availability in the direct routing space. Operator Connect there, direct routing is there, calling plan is there. So there's so many ways you can integrate and make your organization use Teams telephony much easier.
Definitely.
All right.
Well, thank you everybody for attending. I am totally stoked because we've got a whole range of new people that can start to participate. We'll be meeting, to Sue's point, if you have ideas, thoughts that you'd like to see us talk about, let us know. We're meeting again this Friday. We'll be starting to tee up stuff. I do know that Erin, who could not be on today's, she has a whole demo thing she wants to go through. So we'll be talking about that later this week. But yeah, let us know. We're here. We can talk about anything as long as it's in what we're calling modern work. For some reason, I don't know. This really, now I'm showing that my brain doesn't work properly. When I said that, I started picturing Rocco's Modern Life, if you remember that. My son used to watch that when he was a kid.
All right, guys.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, you can catch us. We'll have this podcast with links up. You can also share it with your colleagues. And we are also out there. You can take this on the go on Apple iTunes, on Spotify, and on Google Podcasts. With that, this is Mike.
Scott.
And all of us, and Samir here.
I'm last, so I'm not sure who's next.
And Tracy.
And Jim.
And Sue.
Yay!
Have a great day, everyone. Take care, and as always,
All
ciao.
right, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.